77%. That's the number of people who would literally rather face death than stand up and give a public presentation.
It's an incredible statistic, right? And I mean, if you look at this major 1998 survey by Kessler, you see a 30% lifetime prevalence of social anxiety disorder.
30%?
Yeah, 30%. That basically means nearly a third of the population experiences severe, debilitating dread in performance situations at some point in their lives.
So, I mean, if you are a student right now listening to this, and you're standing right outside the double doors of a lecture hall, about to give a presentation that determines your entire final grade, or you're walking into a high-stakes oral exam, and your heart is just hammering against your ribs, you are in very, very crowded company.
Absolutely. You're not alone at all.
Right. And usually, when a machine breaks down, the fix is entirely mechanical. It's objective. Like, you open the hood of your car, you spot a frayed belt, you replace it, and boom, the engine runs perfectly again. It's clean.
Yeah, cause and effect.
Exactly. But in that moment, outside the lecture hall, when your palms are soaked and your mind completely blanks, it doesn't feel like a mechanical glitch. It feels like a profound personal failure, like there's something fundamentally wrong with you.
Which is exactly why we are doing this deep dive today.
Yeah.
Because the research we've pulled together, we're talking about data from Harvard Business School, the MIT Communication Lab, clinical therapy protocols, the Mayo Clinic. It all shows that presentation anxiety is not a character flaw.
Thank goodness.
Right. It is, in fact, a completely mechanical issue. It's just this mix of biochemistry, cognitive glitches, and physical habits. And just like an engine, we can systematically dismantle it and just rebuild it.
And the goal for you, listening right now, is to walk away with a real toolkit to deconstruct that dread. We want to treat this anxiety exactly like the mechanical issue it is. But before we can get into the deep-seated psychological stuff, let's start with the immediate crisis.
The panic right outside the door.
Yes. You are right outside the doors. The exam is in 2 minutes. We need a hardware hack to force a software update on your brain.
Well, we definitely need an immediate practical tool to survive those excruciating final moments, which means starting with your biochemistry. So Amy Cuddy's research at Harvard Business School introduces this concept of power posing.
Right, I've heard of this.
Yeah, to generate a sudden surge of confidence and to physically lower your stress levels.
And the underlying science here is so fascinating to me because we tend to think that emotion originates in the brain and then just sort of, leaks out onto the face or the body. But this research highlights that it's actually a two-way street. How you hold your physical body literally dictates the neuroendocrine levels in your brain.
Precisely. It's bidirectional. So Cuddy's experiment looked at high-power, expansive poses. Think of like how a primate makes itself look larger to establish dominance in the wild.
Like puffing up your chest.
Exactly. These are poses where you take up maximum physical space. So standing up and leaning aggressively over a table on your hands, or, leaning back with your feet on a desk and your hands behind your head.
Just really spreading out.
Yeah. And they had subjects hold these poses for just 2 minutes. No cognitive coaching, no pep talks, just 2 minutes of physical posturing.
And then they contrasted those with low-power restrictive poses, right? Like sitting in a chair, crossing your arms and legs tightly, basically shrinking yourself down to take up as little physical space as possible.
Yeah, folding in on yourself.
And the physiological data they gathered from saliva tests is just wild.
It really is. The high-power posers experienced a 25% decrease in cortisol, which, is the body's primary stress hormone. And at the exact same time, their testosterone, which is a hormone closely linked to power and assertiveness, that increased by 19%.
Wow. And it even changed how they behaved, didn't it?
Yeah. The researchers gave the subjects $2 and offered them a chance to gamble it for $4. And 86% of the high-power posers took the risk, compared to only 60% of the low-power posers.
That's a huge jump.
Meanwhile, the low-power poses did the exact opposite. Holding a restrictive posture increased cortisol by 17% and dropped testosterone by 10%. They essentially manufactured a state of high risk tolerance and low anxiety using nothing but posture.
I do have to push back a little here, though, because this whole fake it till you make it concept can feel, a bit hollow. Like trying to fix a full-blown panic attack by just putting my hands on my hips feels like trying to put out a house fire by turning on the air conditioning.
That's a great visual.
It just doesn't seem strong enough to override a system that genuinely believes it is in mortal danger. If I am terrified of my professor judging my thesis, how does standing like Superman override that?
It's a really fair question, but if we look at the evolutionary biology behind it, the mechanism makes perfect sense. See, your nervous system is constantly scanning your physical state for clues about your environment.
Okay.
If your body is curled into a tight, restrictive ball, it is sending an emergency signal to your brain saying, we are under threat, release the cortisol. But by forcing an expansive posture, you are manually interrupting that feedback loop. You're telling your nervous system, we are safe, we are dominant, stand down.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the posture isn't a Band-Aid. It's an actual manual override switch for your endocrine system.
So the move for a student is, before you walk into the room, you find a quiet hallway or a bathroom stall, take 2 minutes, stand tall, expand your chest, and just let your hormones do the heavy lifting.
Exactly. Just let the biochemistry work.
That is an amazing immediate shield. But, I mean, if you are waking up at 3 a.m. sweating about a presentation that is still 3 weeks away, a power pose isn't going to fix that chronic dread. For that, we have to look at the psychological rewiring.
And that brings us to the clinical framework. So Professor Suresh Bhattamath maps out this cognitive behavioral therapy approach, a CB2 protocol specifically for social phobia.
Okay.
To understand how to rewire the brain, you first have to understand the mechanism of the anxiety itself. He calls this the CABS model. That's cognition, affect, behavior, and autonomic symptoms.
Let's map that directly onto a student's experience so it's super clear. The cognition is the thought, right? Like, I am going to fail and everyone is going to laugh at me.
Right. That's the seed.
And then the affect is the resulting emotion, which is intense dread. The behavior is what you do next. So avoiding eye contact, over-preparing, or maybe skipping the class entirely. And then the autonomic symptoms are the physical reactions, the trembling voice, the racing heart.
You've got it. And the trap is that when you hear your own voice trembling the autonomic symptom, it reinforces the negative cognition. Your brain says, see, I am trembling, I really am failing. The cycle just spins faster and faster.
It feeds on itself. So Professor Math outlines a very thorough 12-step clinical protocol to break this cycle. But, looking through all the administrative baseline assessments and intake steps, the absolute engine of the treatment really comes down to 2 vital mechanisms.
Graded exposure and cognitive restructuring.
Yes. Let's talk about exposure first, because it sounds intimidating, but it's really the gold standard for lasting change.
Think of graded exposure like weightlifting for your nervous system.
Yeah.
You don't walk into a gym and try to deadlift 300 pounds on day 1. You'd break your back. You start with the empty bar. Graded exposure means building a hierarchy of your fears, listing anxiety-provoking situations from lowest to highest.
So a low-level exposure might just be saying hello to a stranger in the cafeteria or asking a store clerk a question. You just do that until it becomes incredibly boring.
Exactly, until there's no spike.
Then you move to a medium exposure. Maybe eating alone in a highly visible public place or forcing yourself to share one single opinion in a small study group. And finally, you work up to the high-level exposures, like giving a large presentation or debating a topic in front of the whole class.
But the absolute critical mechanism making this work is a concept called habituation. When you expose yourself to the fear, your anxiety will naturally spike. Your instinct is to run away. But if you just sit in the fire, if you stay in the situation without fleeing, the anxiety will eventually peak and then naturally subside.
Because your body just can't sustain panic forever.
Right, and your brain learns, oh wait, I didn't die. This environment is actually safe.
Which brings up a fascinating and frankly pretty counterintuitive point about something clinical psychology calls safety behavior.
Oh, this is a big one.
Yeah, let's say I am terrified of blushing during a presentation, so I wear a really thick layer of foundation makeup. Or I'm terrified of forgetting a point, so I over-prepare for 12 straight hours. Or during the actual talk, I grip the edges of the podium so hard my knuckles turn white. Shouldn't finding a physical anchor or over-preparing actually help an anxious student feel grounded?
You would naturally assume so, right. But safety behaviors actually completely sabotage the habituation process. They block the brain from learning.
Wait, how does that work?
Because if you survive the presentation while gripping the podium for dear life, your brain doesn't learn that public speaking is safe. Your brain learns that the podium saves your life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If you wear the heavy makeup, your brain thinks the makeup is the only reason you weren't rejected by the room. By relying on those crutches, the fear remains perfectly intact underneath. You have to willingly remove the armor to truly extinguish the fear response.
That is terrifying.
It is. You have to let your hands rest casually at your sides. You have to risk the blushing. You have to let the brain experience the raw situation and survive it.
You have to prove to the nervous system that the environment is safe, not the crutch. That makes so much sense. And that perfectly sets up the other engine of the CBT protocol, which is cognitive restructuring. Because when we are caught in that fear loop, we fall victim to massive cognitive distortions.
The two most common offenders here are mind reading and catastrophizing.
Right.
Mind reading is when you look at a professor who happens to be frowning and you instantly decide, oh, they hate my thesis. When in reality, they might just be trying to read your incredibly small font or they have a headache.
And catastrophizing is that deep belief that if you stumble over a single word, your entire academic career is permanently ruined.
Exactly. It's turning a molehill into a mountain.
So the protocol suggests fighting this by replacing those automatic negative thoughts with daily, logical cognitive shifts. It's about building a daily practice of self-affirmation, just reminding yourself of objective truths like, it is completely normal to feel nervous, or not everyone in that room is judging me. And my personal favorite, everyone is mostly lost in their own world.
That last one is incredibly freeing when you really internalize it. People are generally thinking about their own lives, their own unread emails, their own anxieties. They are not scrutinizing your every micro-expression.
Okay, so we've hacked the biochemistry with power poses, and we've rewired the underlying dread using graded exposure and cognitive restructuring. Your mind is calm, the system is rebooted. But here is the harsh reality.
You still actually have to deliver the content.
Yes, you have to speak, and even the calmest mind can be totally betrayed by poor vocal habits.
Absolutely. The mechanics of the speech itself really matter. And the most common insidious saboteur of a speaker's credibility is the filler word.
The dreaded filler word, like I just did there.
It's so hard to avoid.
It is. The and you know. We're looking at data from Rutgers and quantified communications, and it is pretty staggering. The average speaker uses 5 filler words per minute. That is 1 filler word every 12 seconds.
And we really need to understand why that actually damages your presentation. It's not just that it sounds a bit unpolished. The human brain operates on a principle of cognitive economy.
Meaning it wants to conserve energy.
Right. So when an audience has to constantly filter out your ums and ahs to extract the actual information, it requires too much cognitive processing power. They get mentally fatigued, and they simply tune out. To keep an audience truly engaged, the optimal rate is just 1 filler word per minute.
But why do we do it in the first place? Like, why can't we just stop talking when we are thinking? The research explains this as a time distortion glitch, which is so cool. It turns out human beings speak at a rate of about 150 words per minute, but we think at a rate of anywhere from 400 to 1,500 words per minute.
That discrepancy in processing speed is massive. Your brain's processor is racing leagues ahead of your mouth's output speed. So when you lose your place or need to formulate your next sentence, you naturally pause.
Right.
But because your brain is moving at 1,000 words a minute, a 2-second pause feels like an absolute eternity to you. You feel this desperate, agonizing urge to fill the void with sound, hence the
So if a 2-second pause feels like an eternity to me, but sounds completely natural to you listening at 150 words a minute, the trick isn't talking faster to catch up with my brain. The trick is getting comfortable in the silence.
Exactly. You have to embrace the pause.
It's like using filler words is like driving your car with the parking brake on. It completely disrupts the momentum of your speech. A pause is just taking your foot off the gas so you can gracefully navigate a turn. It actually makes you sound deeply thoughtful and in control. But how do we build that muscle?
Well, the first step is a bit painful, but you have to do it. You have to record yourself practicing. You have to figure out what your specific crutch word is because everyone has a favorite.
Mine is definitely right.
A lot of people use like. Once you know yours, Prep suggests forcing a physical action. Tap your leg every time you catch yourself using it during practice. Eventually, that physical feedback trains your brain to catch the impulse, allowing you to just embrace the silent pause instead.
Postmasters also offers some brilliant advice on vocabulary building so you aren't constantly searching for words in the first place. They teach the PREP method for structuring your thoughts. That stands for point, reason, example, point.
I love that framework.
It basically gives your brain a predictable track to run on so you don't panic halfway through a sentence. They also emphasize using common, clear language. Don't say utilize when you can just say use. Don't say assist when you can say help. Simplicity projects authority.
And Reading widely in your specific field allows you to naturally absorb impactful vocabulary. When the right, precise terms are readily available in your working memory, you just don't need to lean on filler words to buy time while you search for them.
All right, so your posture is expansive, your brain knows the environment is safe, your vocabulary is tight, and you've swapped your ums for strategic pauses.
Sounding good so far.
Right. But none of that matters if your voice is shaking so badly that the examiner in the back of the room can't hear a word you are saying. We need to physically train the voice and the eyes for these high-stakes moments.
This is where we turn to the physical delivery mechanics outlined by the MIT Communication Lab and the Michigan State University Extension Program. Let's start with voice projection, because most people assume that to be heard in a large room, you just need to yell.
Which just shreds your vocal cords and makes your throat ache within 5 minutes.
Exactly. True projection comes from the diaphragm, which is the muscle located right beneath your lungs. MIT provides specific exercises to develop this, starting with breathing.
And why does breathing from the belly matter so much? Because when you breathe shallowly from your chest, you are physically activating your sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight or flight response.
Right.
Dropping that breath down to the diaphragm manually forces your heart rate to slow down, shifting you into a parasympathetic, calm state, while also giving your voice a wider chamber to echo in.
So how do you practice it?
You practice this by putting your hands on your belly. When you inhale, your belly should physically push out. Then you exhale by making a hard, forceful ha sound. You should physically feel your stomach muscles contract sharply.
Once you have the breath, you focus on resonance, which is what gives a voice that deep, commanding, steady quality. You can practice this simply by humming, say simple, enthusiastic, move the pitch up and down. You want to feel the vibration in your chest on the low notes, and then move it up until you feel the vibration in the mask of your face, so around your lips and nose.
Because when we are nervous, our vocal cords tighten and our voices tend to get really high and squeaky. To find your optimal authoritative pitch, MIT suggests placing a hand on your chest and swooping an ooh sound from as high as you can go all the way down to your lowest register.
The pitch where you feel the maximum vibration in your chest is your optimal speaking pitch.
And you can build the muscle memory to maintain it by taking a deep breath and counting from 1 to 10, alternating loud and soft numbers on a single breath.
If you train those physical muscles in a low-stakes environment, like your living room, they will automatically perform for you in a high-stakes environment. But your steady voice is really only half of the physical delivery. The other half is eye contact.
Michigan State University Extension has a great, highly specific metric for this, the 50-70 rule. You should maintain eye contact 50% of the time while you are speaking and 70% of the time while you're listening to someone, like when a professor is asking you a question.
And when you are actively scanning the room, you shouldn't just let your eyes quickly dart around. And you absolutely should not look down at your notes or the floor. Looking down projects submission and a total lack of confidence.
So what's the technique?
The technique is to look at one specific person and hold their gaze for 4 to 5 seconds before slowly and deliberately moving to the next person.
I have to admit, holding eye contact with a professor for 5 solid seconds sounds like it could quickly cross the line into a very uncomfortable staring contest. How do we avoid making the examiner feel weird?
It is a delicate balance, I'll give you that. But the research clarifies why 4 to 5 seconds is the exact sweet spot. That duration is just long enough to complete one full thought or one complete sentence.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. Darting your eyes away too quickly makes you look evasive and untrustworthy. Holding the gaze for the length of one sentence conveys a very specific nonverbal message. I see you, and I value your presence in this room. Moving slowly between faces builds trust and creates a presence that is commanding, yet incredibly warm.
Okay, let's bring all of this together for the student listener who has a massive grade-defining presentation looming on the horizon. First, you hack your biochemistry right outside the door. You find a quiet spot and do a 2-minute expansive power pose to manually drop your cortisol and boost your testosterone.
Then, second, you rewire your chronic dread long before the exam using graded exposure, gradually putting yourself in social stressors without relying on safety behaviors, and you shift your negative cognitions with daily logical affirmations.
Third, you clean up your delivery by understanding the time distortion glitch, embracing the silent pause instead of leaping filler words. And finally, you project a steady, resonant voice using diaphragmatic breathing while holding 4 to 5 second eye contact to completely command the room.
And hey, if you face setbacks while practicing all of this, consider a story from the Mystic Keys research. J.K. Rowling was rejected 12 times before Harry Potter was finally published. Persistence is the only way to master these mechanical skills. You just keep rebuilding the engine.
So what does this all mean for you? We want to leave you with the final, completely game-changing paradigm shift derived from the Mayo Clinic. When you are standing up there, sweating and nervous, you tend to vastly overestimate how much your stress is actually showing. Psychology calls it the illusion of transparency.
Yes, you feel like a neon sign of panic, but in reality, the audience is paying attention to the information, not your nerves.
And even better, if they do happen to notice that your hands are shaking slightly, human nature dictates that they will actually root for you to succeed.
Empathy kicks in.
Exactly. People want you to do well. But consider this. Your pre-presentation anxiety isn't actually a sign of weakness. It isn't an indicator of impending failure. It is a deeply biological indicator that you genuinely care about the outcome and the value you are bringing to your audience.
Yeah, if you didn't care, your body wouldn't waste the energy getting anxious.
Exactly. What if you stopped fighting the adrenaline and started using it as fuel? Because at the end of the day, presentation anxiety is not a terminal diagnosis of who you are as a person. It is just a mechanical glitch. The hood is open, we've spotted the frayed belts, and now you have the exact tools to fix the engine